and there's a lot of different aspects of artificial intelligence. Um, but we're lucky tonight to have Matt Williams. He's the founder of Snarful Solutions
You nailed
Group.
it.
And that must be an interesting story on how that name came
Certainly.
about. Maybe you can tell us what that is, Matt. But Matt is a creative problem solver and a high performer with 20 years of experience in all the hot topics that are hot now. Probably back then they weren't as hot, but data analytics it's big. Data management, process improvement has always been big. Having IT experience and healthcare experience and financial services, all great industries. Matt has excellent communication skills and is very good in the technology space. And he's here tonight to talk to us about AI and the implications within business analysis. So at this point, Matt, I'll turn it over to you.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. And I do have a slide deck just to let you guys know. It's going to be a little bit interactive. So if you can be on the chat, that would be great as I look for some feedback on some questions. But also the first part of this presentation is going to be a bit more textbook, and I'll talk you through some slides. And then if we have time, I like to showcase a real world example of how I'm currently using artificial intelligence in one capacity to help with doing business analysis as well. So with that, let me go ahead and share my screen. Oops, there we go. Can you guys see that slide okay?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So AI and business analysis is quite a large, ominous topic. But what we're going to do is we're going to dive into it a little bit at a high level, and then we're going to drill down into perhaps some use cases. So with that, first, let me just introduce a little bit about myself, what we do at Snarful Solutions Group. So we like to say we connect the right dots with the right people. We found that there was a really interesting trend during the beginning of the pandemic where a lot of organizations were looking for expert level consulting, but on a fractional basis. So while they may not need a full-time person to be in a C-level role in their small to mid-sized organization, they needed C-level expertise when they needed it. And that was essentially on the fly. So what we do is we partner with our clients and provide fractional IT roles. And what that means is essentially part-time work. And it can be anywhere from 5 to 10 hours a month on a retainer or consultative basis, up to 20 plus hours a week, filling a role on the interim, or just serving a need on a particular project. So oftentimes with these large complex IT projects, there's in-house staff that you all are part of an organization. But it'd just be nice if you had a trusted advisor that was vendor agnostic to the solution that you're implementing to share best practices and common ways that these projects have been successful. So that's what we do. So we do have the capability of providing full-time. Most of our clients do not want that. They just want somebody to come in part-time to help them get over the hump and hopefully train some of their staff in the process. So with that, I already see a chat. I don't know if that's directed at me. Oh, that's to the volunteer opportunities. So
Yeah, sorry about that, Matt.
I was like, wow.
I just want to do it before I forgot.
So that is predictive feedback to give a little teaser. So with that, let's just jump into it a little bit. First and foremost, I use this quote when anybody asks me about AI. And it truly doesn't make bad analysts good. It makes good analysts great. And I actually liked one of the articles I found on the IIBA website called AI's Impact on Business Analysis. And they refer to it as a superpower. So again, part of the value prop of business analysts is communication skills and working through requirements. I'll touch on that in a second. Being able to ask thoughtful questions about the requirements to be able to do any type of AI is tantamount. And so if you don't know the context of what you're working in, it won't help you with that. But if you know the context, you can ask smart questions to predictive tools and they will help formulate those answers. So when people say, is AI going to take my job? I say no, because just like spell checker didn't take people's jobs, or a calculator taking accountants' jobs, it's just an evolution to what we all do. And it's a tool that we should all become more and more comfortable with. There are some cautionary tales with it as well, which we'll touch on. But I like to say this at the beginning of these types of conversations because it's really, truly a superpower, like the article in the IIBA said. With that introduction, we're going to go a little bit over the overview, rapidly evolving business landscape, importance of tools for you all, and then the alignment of the business objectives for enhanced efficiency. So I want to ask the group in the chat just a very top level question. How many AI companies do you feel like are out there in the world right now as of 2024? Just throw in a number that you think artificial intelligence companies that are out there right now. See, Heather said 42, 500 from Steve. Oh my goodness, 2.2 million.
Yeah, that at least I think at least that many major small companies, small and medium enterprises.
Yeah, we will play Price is Right rules, as I like to say. That's a little bit old.
More the better, I think. One per bot.
Yeah, there you go. Well, the on the website that I found, 67,200 artificial intelligence companies are founded worldwide as of 2024, and about 25% of those are based out of the United States. So if you think about 70,000 companies saying that they're an AI company, everyone's going to have different interpretations of what AI means to them. There are 115 million companies currently using AI. But what does that mean when you say you use AI? There's a lot of different use cases for that. And funding for AI companies is growing in orders of magnitude around 7x. So that means more and more funding is going towards these AI companies. It is it's a growing industry. It's becoming instrumental for just the challenges that we're dealing with, because with the growth of applications comes the growth of data. With the growth of data comes the need to understand it better. And we need these more sophisticated tools to help us with understanding all the data that we're collecting. But also AI can be used to help facilitate communications. It can be used to help collect requirements. It really just allows everyone to be more efficient and effective with their role in the processes that they do. And help identify potential obstacles as well. So good guesses. I don't know who won. I'd have to scroll back through the chat. Diana said 10,000. So Price is Right rules says Diana's the winner. If that means anything for the raffle, I'm not sure. So with that, evolving roles of business analysts. So, for those that have been as a business analyst for a period of time, that the tools are changing, the role is changing, how you interact with your stakeholders is evolving as well. So understanding how AI and the data processing aspects of it, and really the role that you all are playing, is becoming more strategic in nature. Because the day that AI can ask really thoughtful questions to a stakeholder is a long ways away. We need that human element to be able to give the human insight, to be able to work with customers and stakeholders, and really understand from a human insight perspective when it comes to that face-to-face type of communication, or face-to-Zoom even. So as AI tools become more prevalent, there's also ethical considerations too. So, there's a story that you may have heard about over the last couple months from Google's Gemini with the biases that it was introducing with the images that it was generating. So, as a Spider-Man quote, with great power comes great responsibility. And the more these tools are becoming available, I like the question that was posed at the top of the meeting about, is your company using AI now? And some say they're cautious, and that makes a lot of sense. you have a cloud-based server essentially collecting, private information if you're going to train it into AI models. And if you're not using the right technology and infrastructure to keep that intellectual property in-house, then you're training the model every time that you use it. So there's a lot of ethical challenges as well. But at the end of the day, again, this tool is meant for to help the BA be more efficient and more effective. And the less time you can spend doing the routine tasks, the more time you can be using to collect requirements, work with stakeholders, understand goals and objectives of projects that you're all working on. So with that, we'll move on. I don't know if you guys noticed, but one of my favorite features on these slide decks is this line is going to tell you how far we're moving along. So that's how many slides I got. How AI tools enhance business process or business analysis process. Well, we talk a lot about automation. We talk about just the tools that are in the space. How many of you, and this is a kind of a question that was at the top of the hour as well, are you all familiar with RPA, or repetitive task automation? I'll look for it in the chat. We got a yes, we got a couple no's. Yes as well. There it is. Yeah, I mean, again, these are the types of tools that could be under the umbrella of AI. And so using RPA, or natural language processing, to automate those routine tasks as well, these are the tools that we all need to understand when we do a business analyst function, because it helps solve the problem. And I truly believe the reason why we're in these organizations that we are is that we help solve problems. And to do it the most efficient and effective way is the best interest of the organization. You also can use them for real-time data analysis. If you have a process in place, and I'm thinking more of supply chain management, there's ways of using IoT type devices to understand where things may get stuck in a pipeline. So you can use lean methodologies. I know some are Six Sigma as well, to understand where there's waste and where there's bottlenecks in process. You can use it for UAT testing as well. So as you spin up a website and you want to test, server load, there's smoke testing that you can do for end user training or end user testing, excuse me. So there's just a variety of ways that you can use automation and efficiency. And again, I capture all those within AI tools. And it's, when you see AI on the news, they may talk about the ChatGPTs and the Google Bards and Geminis, the co-pilots of Microsoft. Those are tools as well, but there are a lot of other tools out there. Enhanced decision-making capabilities, we'll talk about predictive and prescriptive analytics, especially in the insurance sector. Understanding predictive analytics of where there might be cost or churn is very important. So, understanding where the puck is going, as opposed to just right-clicking on an Excel chart and doing a linear regression trend line, but also doing other types of regression testing as well on your data. It's all very important. And then, I'll make a plug for this too. Whenever we're doing any type of process automation, data capture is so tantamount with AI. I can't speak highly enough for proper data capture and data quality and data cleanliness. Understanding and putting those types of safeguards in any type of process that you're working on are only going to be more critical the more that you move to an AI type of structure. And then lastly, language and communication barriers. There's other AI tools out there that will work with translation services. And so if you're working in a global space, can you use real-time language translation in your conversation so you can communicate with team members that are in different countries in native languages? So this, again, is an AI tool. It helps with business analysis. It can also help with communication barriers, stakeholder interaction as well. These are all mechanisms of AI. And so while you may not think that you've used AI, chances are, you have. And I bring up that spell check, for example. That was a really crude example of very early type of AI when they did the right click and suggest when you have a typo in your email. It's looking through a large model of key terms and seeing common spelling mistakes and suggesting different words that you were trying to spell. So with that, moving on, we do want to talk about the challenges. And I mentioned this with bias and discrimination. This is a really huge topic that it gets very newsworthy as AI becomes more prevalent in society. And it really has the propensity to be discriminatory. There are stories, like I mentioned, of Google Gemini. There's a story from Microsoft where they released a chatbot on Twitter that learned, and this was Twitter while it was Twitter, not X now. And within a few days of learning from Twitter data, the chatbot ended up becoming fairly racist. And so they had to end up shutting it down because of the biases that it learned from the platform of the data that it was trained from. And so we have to be very cautious about what our trusted source of truth is for the information that we're getting. Another example I've used with folks, and it's somewhat of a candid comment, I like to think of those chat GPTs as your drunk uncle at Thanksgiving. And so while they may be very knowledgeable, you have to trust but validate. And so, there's good information that comes, but you don't necessarily know where that information came from. And so you want to be sure that you're vetting it appropriately. Yes, it is a good reason to stay away from Twitter. You also have privacy concerns as well. And so this is another reason why organizations shy away from using AI type tools, especially those of ChatGPT. Most likely your organization has them blocked because they don't want you copying and pasting sensitive private information into a public resource. And I say public because ChatGPT is public. When you start training models to give you analysis, and I'm glad that you guys are talking about business analytics next month, you have to be very cautious about what data you put into the model because it's always learning. And so if you are an insurance company and you post a CSV file of patients that you want to do an analysis on, well, you just had a HIPAA breach. And so you really have to be cautious of that. That kind of goes into the ethical and regulatory hurdles. Again, you can't just jump right in and start using AI in your workplace without careful consideration of data leakage. Steve, you have your hand up?
Yeah, not to go back a few slides, but because you just said something about being careful about what data you put in. And talking about RPA, I always thought of RPA as it only does exactly what you tell it to do. It doesn't learn, it doesn't do anything like that. So has it evolved already beyond that to be considered AI?
Yeah, and so RPA tools, I mean, if we're kind of skating to where the puck is going, RPA tools like Blue Prism and others, it was very task oriented where you told it to do this task on this part of the screen, click these buttons, move forward. Now there's ways that RPA can learn from human behavior about what screens are being clicked and make suggestions on how to complete that workflow. And then go so far to say, would you like me to complete that workflow for you? So these are more bleeding edge type of technologies, but they are becoming, they're going to be coming out there. And so if you can do screen records with a variety of different tools and record your clicking and screens, it's going to be within a few years that you'll be able to save workflows like that.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it gets very
to
interesting.
say the least.
Right. I'll put in a plug for a resource that I love. Those that ever have to create how-to documents of how to do a workflow. I'm a huge fan of ScribeHow. I'll go ahead and type it in the chat now. Oops. This is a tool that allows you on as a Chrome extension, record the screen of what website you're on and will automatically take snapshots of what screens that you click on and put it into an interface where you can type how-to instructions. It is a really helpful tool for creating how-to documents. But again, as you create these how-to documents, you're essentially recording your screen and recording screenshots and saving those to public services. So you want to be cautious with that. I wouldn't ever suggest that you use Scribe How to teach a workflow of how to update, insurance information in a production environment, right? Because the same reason why you wouldn't use a snipping tool or Snagit in a production environment to show how to do things. So, yeah, I mean, the ethical side is what you hear a lot of talking heads talk about on TED Talks or in the news with thought leaders of, you'll hear a variety of quotes, oftentimes referencing the Terminator or T2. These are not that, not that outlandish, but a little bit doomsday-ish. I find the tool to be incredibly valuable, so I use it frequently. Then to kind of finish off the challenges, we have financial implications. There's high costs of implementing AI. And so there will be challenges. And so any type of large market cap arena with startup companies will look to drive costs down to end up being a vendor of choice due to price, because the market will be saturated with AI vendors. We just talked about almost 70,000 of them in the market, 25% of that in the United States. Everybody says they're an AI company now. So when you're starting to vet these companies, you really have to understand when they say AI, what does that mean? Because you don't want to purchase an AI tool thinking it's going to do everything and then have your stakeholders disappointed. So, and it's a big investment. And then finally, technical challenges too. When you start utilizing AI tools, you're essentially asking an oracle or a black box a question and hoping for an answer. You don't necessarily know how that answer came about from the black box. These large language models that are a part of the AI sphere, they train their data from a variety of sources. And so you have to be cautious, and that's where biases and discrimination come in. So I'm just reading Juron's question or comment. You're still on see it. Yeah. Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree about anonymizing captured data. I had the privilege of working on a project that was using tokenization for de-identifying PII. And it's a lot of clever tools. And so when you see companies like NVIDIA stock price go up and up and up because they're the enablers of AI technology, there will be other companies that do the same. And so I reference kind of the Levi Strauss story for those that are from and live in California. You don't necessarily get rich digging for gold. You can also get really rich selling pickaxes and jeans to the people that are looking to buy gold or find gold. So with that, technical challenges, financial implications, regulatory hurdles, not to scare anybody off, but you have to go in with your eyes wide open to these types of things. What we don't want as those doing business analysis to lead our executive stakeholders to say, AI can solve for that. It's just it's a dragon that you won't necessarily be able to catch. So of course, I'll talk about the gloom and doom, but there are opportunities presented in AI. So advanced predictive analytics, this is one that's near and dear to my heart. It's what I specialized in my master's program for as well. You have the capability of pouring through a tremendous amount of data and looking for not only trends, but affinity when you come to what variables are, impacting a particular, diagnosis, let's say. It could be variables that we may not think about. And that's really the power of and the business analysis with AI, is that it can find these types of synergies with the data that we may not even know to ask. A tool that's starting to do that pretty well is Microsoft Power BI. And there's a feature for those that are on a more elevated licensure of Power BI, is you can basically ask it to generate a variety of different visualizations on a dashboard based on what it's finding within the data itself. So it's speeding up the process for data discovery because we're letting the data speak for itself as opposed to trying to get the answer out of the data that we're looking for. So we also have improved stakeholder engagement. Tools can analyze communication patterns. One of my favorite examples that I did when I worked for a large healthcare organization in Northern California is I created a sentiment analysis on all my emails, and I was able to ascertain when certain executives were going to use more of a negative tone in their emails at certain parts of the day. Why this was important, and I used it as kind of a proof of concept, but I realized that I'm never going to schedule a meeting with this particular executive on a Tuesday afternoon, because every email that this executive sent on a Tuesday afternoon had a negative connotation in the sentiment analysis. So you look for these types of ways to say, well, when is my audience going to be the most receptive? And there's ways to do sentiment analysis on emails and communications to understand, to be able to give you kind of the insight of who you're working with and when. We have innovation and learning. There's always going to be opportunities. Today is one of them where you guys are all getting PDUs. But I highly, highly recommend that you continue to research and learn about the AI space. I feel as all people in this space should be dedicating a certain percentage of their day that they feel they can muster to just researching and learning. And so spending 30 to 45 minutes a day, even just learning about what's out there in the space, learning about what tools and exploring those, experimenting with them. It's how I found a couple of different tools that I'm going to showcase at the end of this presentation that have really been helpful for me in process documentation. So I like operational efficiency as well. We're going to remove the repetitive tasks. We're going to allow business analysts to focus on higher value activities. So we're not spending the time generating requirements documentation. We're letting the tools help with that. My example to tease it a little bit is generating essentially Visio diagrams through code, which is a pretty impactful and powerful way to do documentation. And I already kind of touched on the enhanced customer experience or interaction. Again, I go back to sentiment analysis, but understanding customer behaviors and patterns can help lead to better interactions with stakeholders. And so as we learn about the people using the processes that we help develop and design, then we can enhance their experience as well. So moving on, any thoughts or questions? I'm kind of caffeinated and I speak fast, so I apologize for that. Thoughts, questions, comments? I'm seeing the chat kind of go off a little bit, and I love it. So anything out there?
Just a quick question. So I like the improved stakeholder engagement. So what type of engagement would we be able to do with AI? Like does it mean like with high power, high influence stakeholders, there would be separate like a separate influence type thing with the stakeholders there?
So I think your question, and it's a good one, is leading towards how can you improve stakeholder engagement more at the executive level?
Yeah.
And so that's where having metrics of success, and so maybe that can be a kind of a common denominator to the next conversation you all have around business analytics is so important. I have found that the best way to get executive stakeholders excited is to show them progress and success. And the best way to do that is to define KPIs early and often and report on those. And so when you have access to data and you have access to tools to analyze the data, in the AI space, AI being a very generic space, you have the ability to report up to your executive stakeholders how the process is going. I'm sure there's Six Sigma black, green, white belts on the call too.
Mhm,
You
mhm.
know, one of the challenges that you have with any type of change process or a process of change is that how do you communicate success, or how do you baseline that data and then incorporate a change and then understand how that change impacted the data? Well, before you'd have to request a report, and then that report would be built, and then you'd have it as a baseline, and then you would do your change, and then you would run that same report, and then you do the difference between the two. There are AI tools out there that help understand when that change took place. And it can also look at the data itself to realize that there was a change event that occurred because now the data is changing after a specific period of time. So to me, improving stakeholder engagement, one, I love a good sentiment analysis, just understanding what their personality and behaviors are. So you can really work from them on an interpersonal level. But then two, developing strong KPIs that are easily reportable and understood so they can monitor and measure success. Because I haven't found an executive yet that doesn't like a good success story.
Yeah, like basically like in any type of engagement tool, regardless of who you are. So for example, if it's a high power, high influence, low power, low influence,
Mhm.
would there be separate type of tool or Six Sigma or metric related AI tool which would say the type of engagement that you would have, especially whether you're uh responsible responsible anywhere in the RACI matrix where you're responsible, informed, consulted. Or you're anywhere in the racing matrix where either you're responsible, the approver, or you're consulted or informed. Does that mean that you can have AI will enhance the entire landscape, the entire life cycle of from a BA perspective?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and this is where I get cautious because one AI tool won't necessarily be able to do all of those types of things, right? So if you're looking at high executive, high influence, high executive stakeholders, then you want to have more of a white glove level treatment where AI can help support you to create that experience for them. If you have a volume of, we'll call them users. I always feel bad when I say like low influence, low authority. That's where I've used AI to automatically create chatbots that can help scour FAQ pages on organizational websites to help answer questions for them. And so, where I found that to be beneficial is every chatbot that you interact with saves a record of what question was asked. And then the end user can also basically respond with, was that helpful or not? So you can learn about the types of questions that people are asking. I've used models like that for I'll call it for the masses when I'm trying to do engagement, because a well-informed chatbot will basically get a sentiment analysis of the types of questions people are asking on a larger scale. I wouldn't necessarily roll a chatbot out to executives because I feel like that's more of a white glove level treatment. But you'd have to find the right tool for the right arena. Hopefully that helps. And I know it's the
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. No, great questions. I love this type of feedback. And I like Steve's there too. Cognos has a similar tool, IBM Watson. I remember the days where Watson competed on Jeopardy too. That was really fun to watch. But there's other tools out there. I'll put a plug in for this. Microsoft Teams as well. If you're on the latest version of Power BI, you actually can link to your own Teams data and do your own dashboard of who you're interacting with and how long are your calls and how many different chats that you are you're involved with on a daily basis. It's actually pretty clever how Microsoft integrated Teams data on the back end to allowing you to analyze it with their own tool in Power BI. So absolutely. Thank you, Tejas, for joining. Any other thoughts, questions, comments, stories, jokes? I'll take them all. All right, we will move right along. Future-proofing your career. I think this is important, especially as we learn PDUs or as we're getting PTUs. And I mentioned this before, continuous learning and upskilling understanding what tools are out there. Again, 70,000 companies out there. You don't need to know them all, but there are different websites that you can research to find different tools that help for particular use cases. So again, I'll mention the one that I'm loving currently, but being knowledgeable in this space will do nothing but help you in your career, because when you talk to executive stakeholders about solving a problem and what are the requirements, not only can you use AI to help formulate the questions to the requirements, but you can use these tools and see what's out there to be able to help solve the problem. Also recognizing that there are budget implications of net new software purchases. A lot of companies are shying away from that because they're looking to kind of conserve some of their technology dollars. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's off the table. So I would encourage just to be knowledgeable. And every time I've recommended a software solution to any executive, I've always made sure to talk about an ROI and understanding that if this tool is going to save X amount of dollars for Y cost, this is in the best interest of the company. So being able to have those types of answers are critically important. Deepening AI, machine learning, familiarize yourself with these types of methodologies, play around with it. We'll just ask the chat, how many of you have used ChatGPT for any particular reason, or Google Bard or Copilot? Just by a show of comments in the chat. Diana has. ChatGPT, Copilot, I have. Nope, from Alan. In a lot of ways, all the time for ideas. I agree with you, Rudy. ChatGPT has essentially changed my search habits away from Google. And so, especially if I'm looking to do any type of code writing, I will ask ChatGPT, especially in the instances of, well, I've written code, it's functioning, and I'm happy with it. And again, always recognizing privacy concerns about what I'm putting in there, but it's just a little code snippet, so I wasn't worried about it for my project. I pasted a whole code snippet into ChatGPT and said, can you make this more efficient for me? And it did. It literally redid my code in a more efficient way and commented it for me that I could paste back into the project I was working on, and it generated the same results. It was this amazing use of the tool. I think I surprised Steve with that. And that's why I look to tools that are using more text-based language. I love that analogy, Bob, or example about business plans. I use it all the time when I talk about these things. But again, the difference between using these tools to create something, and I'll use Bob's example. Bob, I'm going to venture a guess that you're pretty familiar with a business plan and what the idea of a business plan is, correct?
Yeah.
Right. You can't just, I don't know. I have no idea what a business plan is. Can you create one for me? And this is that quote of, it won't take a bad analyst to good. It'll take a good analyst to great. If you have an idea of what a business plan is, but you want to help structure it and frame it and remind you of any gotchas that you might have forgotten, as opposed to using a template, this is where a valuable tool like that comes in. So it's not just about somebody being able to do your job, because you still have to understand what the context of your job is. And that's why developing soft skills, professional networking like this now, love that example, Steve, of enhancing descriptions for an item on sale. You still have to know what the item is. You still have to post it. We're a long ways away from just automatically going through your garage and putting stuff on eBay, even though my wife would probably appreciate that. But yeah, the soft skills, the professional networking, the learning, the technologies and the tools in the marketplace are all very tantamount to the success of being a business analyst, in my opinion. And then using them in an ethical way that's adaptable. You want to be able to pivot and just learn from it all. So yeah, I love those examples. I love the business plan, eBay, Copilot as well. Now, as Bob was saying too, in Chrome, if you do a search in Google, part of the answer at the very top will be AI generated. So it's getting incorporated more and more into it. With that conclusion, and then we'll jump into some kind of show and tell stuff. We have a little bit of time. Talked about AI's transformational role in business analysis, from the challenges to the opportunities to future-proofing your career. How do you use the AI tools in the process? It's opportunities for efficiency, decision-making, stakeholder engagement. These are all ways that we can use some aspect of AI to be better at what we do, but always just keep in mind data privacy, ethical considerations. I love that too, Jaron. AI generated test questions. I did that similar thing. I have twin boys that are in 3rd grade. One of them is participating in a mental math bowl tomorrow, actually. And I built him a mental math bowl trainer in ChatGPT that basically just asks him the types of math questions that he's going to be asked tomorrow at the math bowl. It took about 30 minutes to their build from start to finish. He loves it. He thinks I spent days on it, but I won't tell him how long it took. So with that, here's an example. Real world documentation, real world use case. So how many of you on the chat have heard of mermaid.js? It's kind of a newer technology that's out there. Good eggs. Not a lot. Another one that's in this space too is Plant UML. Those similar types of technologies. But this diagram that you see on the screen right now, that's a common flow chart. I was asked to help kind of build a kind of essentially a knowledge base, but a how-to document on some best practices for a SQL Server environment. So I wanted to lay out, the weekly task versus monthly as needed. And then within that, I was able to kind of give more descriptions of the things that they should be looking for. So that image there was actually generated by that code snippet. So why that's cool and why I get so excited about it is that being able to generate flowcharts or user requirements documents, or even ERDs if you're more in the database world, based on text is a superpower, because then you can use AI-based tools to help you generate that text with common questions that you can ask. So what I like doing is markdown documents are very common in the programmer space. It's often used to supply documentation to folks that use Git or GitHub to kind of create how-to documents. Markdown is a very valuable tool for generating documentation on process. You can embed Mermaid snippets into Markdown documents. So what you can essentially do is create a very helpful guide that incorporates visualizations of the process, all by using code. And that code can be helpfully generated through AI tools. So you don't necessarily have to open up Visio and draw all the lines and all the boxes. I've used the same type of thing for org charts, because it's a very top-down flow chart of creating the relationships between the entities. So if you take anything away from today, I highly recommend checking out Mermaid.js. I'm actually going to pull it up here in a second in the quasi demo. It is a very valuable tool. And this is just one example of how I use AI in business analysis. If I can use code to generate images, it saves me time. And then the next step is, well, can I have a data query pull the results of what I put in the text? So now I'm dynamically generating visualizations in my documentation based on code of calling to a database and generating Markdown document. So that got real technical real quick, but that's just the types of things that you can use AI for, is to help generate documentation. Because I know in the business analysis world, documentation, as I'm going to venture a guess, is a large part of how you all spend your time. Just out of curiosity, let's put it in the chat. How much of your week do you spend writing requirements or process documentation? Bob says 20%, and also asks the question, reverse engineering, turning a picture into code. you can do that as well. So I have literally tested out use cases where I have worked with an executive and we've drawn out a kind of a Visio diagram on paper, taken a picture of it, and it generated the code for me. I like Steve's answer, not as much as I should. You know, so if you think of the lowest answer here is 20%. So 20%, that's 1/5 of your job is writing documentation. And Heather even said 60 plus. So if we can be more efficient, if Heather can, learn, and not to pick on you, Heather, but 60+% of your time, if you could be more efficient with that time by using tools to help you write that documentation, then it allows you to have more thoughtful engagements with your stakeholders, because you're not spending that time writing documentation, but you're spending it working with the customer, understanding what the business problem is, and getting that stakeholder engagement. Heather says, yes, please. I don't doubt it. So with that, it's always a scary thing to go live on a demo, but we have a little bit of time if you all are interested to see how this might work.
Sure, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
it.
Are you
Okay.
okay with us still recording this part?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
I'm going to now go over here. And so,
Matt, you're not going to launch Skynet, right?
not during business hours. Let's do.
Resistance is futile.
I'm going to
Or the
share.
other name, Genesis, right? It became Genesis in one of the later Terminators.
Let's talk through kind of a simple example of how you can use ChatGPT and not necessarily divulge sensitive information. And this is where I like to do it. Again, you still have to know what the context of the answers are. That's why being knowledgeable in your job is important, right? That lifelong learning. So what I've done, let's just see if I can do this. Let's do a website launch. So it's going to take a little bit of time to type that out. It's basically going to create a project plan. Even with ChatGPT 4, it can get a little slow, but it'll kick up here in a second. But once that's done, and again, the speed of it oftentimes is because it is being heavily utilized. If you've ever done a website launch project, you know these steps. You've done them before. But oftentimes you want to make sure, like, you just want to test, you just want to kind of validate your thoughts. So with that, let's see if it's going to finish up. It's basically talking through everything as well. Conclusion. So now it's building out the code for that project plan. And so while it does that, so the editors that I have up. So here's a simple flow diagram. So it gives you samples. This is Mermaid Live Editor. If you go to mermaid.js, you can go into the live editor. You'll be able to play around with these sample diagrams. But what I'll do is I'll wait till this is done. And it is. On chat. Here we go. Copy code. Let's see if it works. And there it is. Now it's a little skewed, so we're going to have to massage that a little bit. But what you end up seeing is basically the entire project plan all laid out with the different steps that it goes. And then you can modify that a bit to be, you want to go left to right. And you can see the flow of how it works through. So I like doing this because it helps me visually see like the steps of a project plan. I found that it works well with executive stakeholders too, so they can see the lineage. I think it was Tejas at the very top of the hour that said, a picture worth 1,000 words. You can basically have an articulated project plan or the steps through a workflow process visually represented just based on code. You can then, with mermaid.js, there's different diagrams that you can create. The Gantt chart is one. It's just a sample one you can generate. User journey as well. If you need to create user journey stories, you can use code to generate this image. The quadrant chart, somebody was bringing that up with like a racing matrix of influence. You can generate a quadrant chart that you can put into a markdown document that helps you visually create these images based on code. Even so far, you can do UML types of diagrams if you really wanted to get a little bit more fancy on these. XY charts are good too, because you can basically generate an image of a graph that you can do in Excel as well, but you can now just do it in code. Another editor that I like with this is mermaidchart.com. This basically gives you a few more sample diagrams. I like this requirements one because it lays it out as more of a classical requirements document. You have sequence diagrams as well that you can generate that I can just paste in there. And now I got a sample that I can work with, and then I can edit this. And I can start there we go. So it's a much easier kind of way to use code to generate these images that you'd use for your documentation. Some of the other ones, they get pretty fancy as well. We've got a C4. I've seen technical architects use this type of technology to build technical infrastructure documents, as well as the relationship of how servers and the transit of data go, all the way down to a user journey story when I already showed that one. But just understanding where people are at in the journey. This particular example talks about me and cat. I don't have a cat, I have a dog. But you can understand how it lays out. So this is, again, it's another example of AI. There are so many different AI tools out there. They're in so many different spaces. This is one that I personally love. I highly encourage all that are doing documentation to tinker around with Mermaid and Markdown so you can generate these documents. When you document in code as well, kind of a plug for that, you have proper version control. You can do rollback. You can store this in a source code repository because it's code, so it's source code. It's not a Word document where you're doing versioning on, which can become quite cumbersome if you have multiple people editing it over time. Much easier to manage the changes of code in a process than it is a Word document that when it gets published. So with that, I see for AI related binge watching, person of interest in Prime Video. I'll check that out, Tron. But yeah, so yeah, I agree with you, John. I enjoy creating documents in Markdown and Mermaid because I get to use AI tools to help generate the code for it. And I wouldn't be able to do that as fast if I had to manually write out all the code. So what I do is I get snippets from tools like this. Flowchart is probably the most common one that I do, but I do mind map is also helpful for when you start to have conversations. And then what you do is you end up copying this code into a Markdown document. And if you don't know what Markdown documents are, research that too. I know I'm running short on time, or I even go into that, but hopefully this has been helpful. And yeah, that's about what I wanted to show today. So thanks for listening. I guess I'll turn it over to Bob or Steve.
Yeah, I mean, if I could have kept that open mouth emoji on the whole time, I would have, because I think I had no idea that it was this involved. Maybe I was just being naive. But if I wanted to like start learning Mermaid JS and this kind of code, it seems pretty intuitive, but where would be a good place to start?
So
if you've never written code before.
If you've never written code before, I would go back to, if you just go to check out their website, a lot of documentation in here. which gives you helpful snippets, even about building Gantt charts. Here are all the different diagram syntaxes that you can use. And so I would start here, of saying that this simple code gives you this. I have an article out on my website currently that talks about business process through or process documentation with business analysis. I'll send you the link to that, Steve, so maybe you can put it in the artifacts of today's session as well.
Sure.
It's a little bit of a how-to, kind of recaptures what I went over live. But again, thank you for all the kind words. But yeah, it's just a tool I'm very enamored with right now. But again, this is one of 70,000. So
Yeah.
there's more and more out there every day. So any other thoughts, questions? I'm always open to compliments. Appreciate them all. Thank you.
No, I'd like to say thank you for imparting this knowledge. As you can tell, I'm a bit of a noob to the AI theater.
Sure.
And I'm basically just starting my journey here. So this has been very helpful, very informative. I'll be back.
Great. Thank you. You know, it's when Steve reached out and was like, can you talk about AI and business processes? It's like, yes, but man, that is a lot of different roads to travel. So I'm glad I was able to kind of hit the mark on going high level and going deep all in the hour that I was allotted. Again, you know, I'll make a shameless plug for me and my company too. This is the type of stuff that we get to do for our clients. You know, it's how do we be more efficient? Because when a client hires me for 10 hours a week to help them, it's not because they want me to sit in 10 hours of all hands meetings. It's they want me for 10 hours to do deeper level work. And so they get an economies of scale there where 10 hours more efficiently can surpass 20 to 30 hours of somebody who's not being as efficient with their time. So that's kind of our secret sauce here at Snarful. That's alliteration too, so it must be true.
Yeah, one of the things, Matt, you know, we run a study group for the BABAC to help people get certified. And one of the things I tell people there is, you know, one of my favorite sayings is, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Absolutely.
You know, and this is just another tool, or maybe lots of tools that just open a new horizon for a lot of people on this call.
Yep.
To just do your job more efficiently, effectively, and, you know, maybe get those 60% down to 30%, but don't tell anybody, and then go have a few margaritas by the pool. Okay, Heather?
I would never advise that.
You had me at margarita.
So
yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. You know, and especially when, you know, we mentioned kind of a recession, you know, we also heard of tech layoffs. What's interesting is that those that are being able to be more and more efficient are the ones that organizations like to keep around, in my opinion. Not to say that anybody affected by layoffs wasn't efficient. I know that there's a lot of heartache that goes into that. I never want to be disparaging towards that. But the more that you can be efficient, the more value you add to your organization. So, Matt, did you already state how you chose Mermaid of all the others? I didn't say it, but here's how I got to there. So Plant UL is another one. You know, what I was looking for was a text to image generation tool that was supported by an AI platform that can help me do rapid code development. And the science pointed me to Mermaid, and I have found success with it. Now, I'll be honest, I have not given the same deeper dive into Mermaid, other tools out there, because I haven't had a need. You know, and that's part of the challenge of, you don't want to chase that dragon of efficiency too hard, or you'll always want for more. And so sometimes when you learn a process like this, you have to take the win, take the 30% efficiency gain, become more and more familiar and savvy with it, think of creative ways to use the tool, and then move on from there. But it's a great point. You know, I'd probably slap my own hand and say, did you do a proper due diligence on all the software vendors out there of doing this type of analysis and deciding on one? No, but but again, it was for me to become more efficient. So Plant UML, that's another good one that I really like.
Could you use AI to figure out which the best AI tool is?
You can, but you also it might have a propensity for bias.
Yeah.
I don't go asking Alexa, are you better than Siri? Maybe I should tonight, but that's another thing, didn't even scratch that surface, but building out widgets now for these common platforms that seem like it's just so hard and sophisticated become easier and easier. Another great tool for business analysts are the low code, no code environments and the IDEs. That stands for Integrated Development Environment. Before you would need to have a true full stack developer to build a web application, and now you can build in a low code, no code environment in an afternoon. And so for those that may remember the days of Microsoft Access, where you could build out your tables and your views, but then you can generate forms for data entry, Microsoft is basically replicating that capability with what they call Power Apps. Power Apps allows you to create a web front-end tool to kind of integrate with your data. And it could be as simple as an Excel data sheet if you wanted to just collect some basic information. But if you wanted to spin up a web app with an Excel data backend that's stored on a SharePoint site, if your organization has opened up Power Apps for you, you could build that in an afternoon just by no tech skills involved.
Yeah, we built a lot of those, and it's really an intuitive tool.
Yeah.
And the integration to all the other Microsoft products makes it even cooler.
Absolutely. With every cool tool comes a challenge. I've seen organizations go a little bit too heavy in that well of Power Apps. And so what they end up doing is trying to replicate an ERP type of capability with a dozen Power Apps, and it can become a nightmare to manage. But yeah, depending on the use case, I think it's a great tool.
One Power App to rule them all.
Don't tell Salesforce. So great. Thank you so much for allowing me to join your meeting and get to talk about the things that I love. And I'll share my contact information with Steve as well. If you ever want to reach out via email, I'm around. I'm based out of Sacramento as well, live in Carmichael. So reach out if you have any other questions, thoughts, anything like that.
Thanks, Matt.